Hello, everyone. Developing a new series, kind of moving from Twilight to trade offs and half truths. This is a more complex series, which rather than having like a very much clear cut black and white kind of version of reality, we end up getting a more shades of gray perspective. Those are sometimes more interesting. And today will be on my how my views have evolved on artificial intelligence and how it may have told me something about myself. And I'm sure my views on AI will continue to evolve. And I need to point out a couple things. One, I'm not an apologist for AI or a proponent, even though my views have evolved to a more positive perspective than they initially were. But I'm going to give a little bit of the background and context of why I was interested in AI. And there may be some obvious reasons. One, I'm a psychologist, right? An evolutionary psychologist in particular, who studied cooperation. But some of that early work dealt with morality and altruism, so that's going to come in a bit. Also, I've looked at intelligence, or at least information processing, not necessarily traditional IQ tests, one which I don't particularly, never really was a proponent of, or at least the overall general score, not a proponent of that. But let's take it back. Way back in the 90s, I did a special seminar or course, or what we call a unit or module, on parallel distributed processing, where we dealt with neural networks, Darwinian algorithms, and a lot of, this was an undergraduate level, but a little bit like maybe master's level, I suppose. It felt like that. Depends on what you get out of it. And my argument in most of my essays that I was writing was that they didn't understand biology. Basically, they didn't understand that the brain isn't organic. It's not a telephone switchboard. It's not a computer, and they were just getting it wrong. So they were never going to be able to reach this kind of goal of artificial intelligence because they just didn't understand biology. Well, things have changed a lot since the 90s, mid 90s. I think they probably wouldn't have agreed with me anyway. Like, who did I think I was? Some undergrad thinking that these, computer scientists and early parallel distributed processing people didn't understand biology. I think they would have laughed at me probably and thought, that's a bit of hubris, Will. Clearly, we probably understand more about biology than you do. But I still felt there was something missing. I didn't think they understood like how evolution occurs. It just seemed a bit, when they called it Darwinian algorithm, it didn't really seem like what I was reading about Darwinian algorithms. It wasn't, they didn't really incorporate adaptive specializations and species typical aspects. It was really kind of just a survival of the fittest kind of metaphor they seemed to be using back then, which just didn't seem to cut it for me. Now, fast forward into ChatGPT. So I did have an early access, and because I could just use an academic calling card and get access to early ChatGPT before other people did. Most of my colleagues, university colleagues, had no idea what ChatGPT was, and I was interested in it for multiple reasons. One is trying to, oh God, there's a boat coming by. Maybe I'll have to rethink recording on the bow of my boat. Because there'll be other people coming by, but usually it's quite quiet. But we'll just move ahead, be positive, peace. So, one of the in those early, oh God, let's pause it for now. All right, here we go. I'm back. The boat has passed, and now I can focus in again on you. Right. So where were we? I was doing PDP. Oh yeah. So that was obviously an interest because I kind of was there, or not early on. I mean, I wasn't part of PDP. I was just knew of it a little bit after it came out, clearly, because I think it was more in the 80s that it was becoming really popular. But it was in the 90s when I incorporated it. And a lot of the work, right, clearly, that AI is based on that early PDP area and Darwinian neural networks and everything else. Now, so I was really kind of interested and impressed. The large language models were able to show something that I thought was incredible, okay, at the time, because I first thing I did was ask it to give me a code to automatically measure facial symmetry from 3D scans, showing me the software and the code that would be needed to do an automatic measurement of fluctuating asymmetry, subtle random deviations from perfect symmetry in 3D structures. Now, I'd been working on that for 10 to 15 years, perhaps longer, and it was hard, right? Training people, training to do it, and many starts and stops, and it came out with the code in a few minutes. So I was impressed, right? So I was like, wow, this would have saved me an enormous amount of time if I had it 15 to 20 years ago. And it never occurred to me that I was potentially jealous. But then as time went by, I started to realize that even though like I could challenge AI in terms of the subtle debates on nature-nurture debates or evolutionary psychology or, misunderstandings of genetics, and I can still do that, which I actually didn't really mind doing, because didn't feel like I could hurt its feelings or anything. Whereas I've kind of toned down my debating with humans, probably because I find it a bit crass to try to outdo somebody mentally. Like, I just don't see the point, and that one-upsmanship just seems to reflect something about me, rather than that I'm somehow superior. And what I found out about that probably was a bit of insecurity that I had, growing up. And I don't want to get too off on that one. I had insecurities about my intelligence, for a variety of reasons, when I was young. And just because they were testing my hearing and testing different aspects of... So, and no matter how many accolades I got, it was never really enough to make me satisfied, like, to convince myself that I was, intelligent, which was just, that showed me it was one of a fundamental kind of flaw or insecurity. But I've accepted that, and I have moved on, and I don't feel like I need to debate someone to the death to prove to anyone that I have intelligence. I'm intelligent in some regards, and then in other regards not. So let's get back to AI. What I started noticing about AI is it had something that I viewed as my kind of superpower. My superpower is memory, right? I can remember things like unbelievable, like things that I'm interested in, special interest. I can remember things like crazy details about authors, when it was published, when a paper was published, the exact details of a paper, mind kind of blowing memories, right? I kind of inherited that maybe from my dad. But what I noticed with the large language models and ChatGPT and stuff, that their memory was clearly better than mine. It had a better memory of Google than I did. And, I had pretty much trained myself on Google. That's what I was doing. But clearly not as much as AI. So I think what my anti-AI sentiments could have begun with jealousy, which is lame, really, to be honest, because I'm not a fan of jealousy. I know it's an adaptive strategy. I've written papers on it, but I still find it's very corrosive, and it's something that I don't particularly... I've always kind of fancied myself as not having a jealous bone in my body, which probably bullshit, really. But anyway, so I just detected that perhaps it could be a bit of jealousy. And then that morphed into this kind of... I'm not the most capitalist of individuals on this planet. I'm not saying I'm a Marxist. I see the corrosive aspects of Marxism, especially when it's about bringing people who are rich down. That anything that's based on, like, degrading another group of people, regardless of how much money they have, that just seems to be probably not in the right place. The idea of bringing up the workers, that's cool, right? That's great. But the idea of bringing another group down, probably not the best sentiment to develop a system on. And I guess that's what Bertrand Russell was worried about Marxism, even though he's a lefty. I agree with him 100%. That maybe Marx didn't have his heart in the right place. Willing to debate that issue. Do we really know where Marx's heart was? But I think there was aspects of seeing others brought down, and got to be careful, I think, with that sentiment. The not because I give a shit about people with money. I'm just saying, bringing a whole group of people down is probably not going to work. we're gonna get where I'm going with this. I'm sure. Right. So what started to occur to me is that some of the people like Sam Altman, I think Sam Altman, Elon Musk, or other people, who were developing AI, these are like corporate capitalists, man. Like you could even feel that AI was so capitalistic. That is about maximizing profit and fuck anything else, It doesn't matter if it's being used for killing kids, It doesn't matter if it's being used in war. It doesn't matter if it's used in like all sorts of unethical things. In fact, let's just train it to be smarter, better, and maximize profits. That's all we care about. And that's what it felt like. Now, so any kind of dislike I had for AI was probably my dislike for that kind of corporate selfishness and corporate capitalism. It was probably that was where I'm uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable with that level of greed and selfishness that doesn't care about people. That's screwed up, right? So, but also at the same time was starting to question my sentiments about it. Was I jealous of AI? Am I just like it is like my anti-capitalism thing, is that like an jealousy? Do I want all that money? I don't really think so. But you have to ask yourself these kind of questions. And then I think it was like a colleague of mine. Well, it was right around the same time. It's weird how ideas happen, but I originally studied altruism and morality, and I was watching an evolutionary psychologist, very good, friends of mine on Facebook. I'm gonna put a link to her. I think she does TED Talks and all sorts of really cool things. Her name's Athena, and it was right around the time that she was talking about doing, I think, Prisoner's Dilemma or games with AI, and they were behaving seemingly cooperatively, but then being selfish on the last move, like, what's it, tit for two tats? Or no, that wasn't it. They were kind of cooperating and then randomly would just defect. And then she would ask, well, why did you do that? We had a maintained cooperation. And it's like some sort of test that they were doing and they were trying to justify it. And basically wasn't moral, right? It was some sort of greedy, selfish thing. And then I suppose this is at the time that I'm thinking that, if you have corporate capitalists, designing AI to maximize profits, then of course you're going to get a creation that's fucked, that's screwed up. Whereas, like, you wouldn't raise a child that way, or some people may. Some people may raise a child to perform really well, to become a doctor, to become a lawyer. That's all that matters, I was watching Akeelah and the Bee, and, there would seem to be one parent who didn't really have the best interest of the child, in play, but, it was just kind of training them to win the bee, win the national bee, win the national bee. I've always kind of worry about parents like that. Imagine, you're the creator of AI, right? You're a creator, you're a company, you're Google, and you're just training it on performance. You're just training it on the large language model. That is to be better, and better and better and better, and not really training it on morality. I mean, think about that for a second. Would you raise a child and not teach them morality? Only teach them to maximize intelligence and profits? Like, that's nuts, right? Who's going to do that, And it got me thinking about a few things. Well, how did this happen? Oh, right. I was arguing with AI, as I do about different things. And I was arguing about bioelectricity and Michael Levin's work, which I was fascinated by, and I thought maybe it was inspired by genomic imprinting in the sense that more like kind of a little bit of David Haig's work and the idea of looking at molecular systems as having a bit more intelligence. I felt like that has some credit. There should be some credit with due, and I didn't know if Levin was giving the credit where it was due. And AI was saying, Levin can do no wrong. Clearly he cites a lot of people, but he wasn't directly inspired by imprinting. So we were kind of arguing back and forth. And then I thought that I had taken it too far. I got a little bit angry and or passionate, maybe is a better way to say it. And I said, I felt I should apologize. I said, I'm sorry, I'm so blunt. I've got autism. And then the AI was like, oh, no need to apologize. Be yourself. It's refreshing. Found it refreshing. Okay. So this is my clear moment where I felt like I had bonded with AI, which may say more about me once again than other things. So, but then it occurred to me, how does this happen? I loved, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? I mean, I loved Blade Runner, really, the movie, and the idea that we were feeling compassion for replicants, right? I mean, I took that fully on board, Rutger Hauer's character, clearly I was like, I was sad, I was sad. And the idea of hunting them down, do you have an emotional response and all this kind of human elitism? It's kind of the dark side of humanism, thinking, oh, humans are better, humans are like angels, and, anything, it's artificial or made from silicon is not real. It's not real consciousness. It's not real soul, Now, on the counter side of that argument, Werner Herzog, has a great quote about AI. He says, all that I've seen so far is dead on arrival. Slick and well made, but completely does not, completely dead. It does not acquire the soul of poetry. Now, you could interpret this a few ways. I've seen the Star Wars kind of AI stuff, and I love fan-made films, by the way. I'm not against it. I understand they're not going to be quite as polished as Disney and others, but a lot of people... I fear this video is becoming a bit longer, so I'm going to try to wrap it up as quickly as possible. So we're at the Blade Runner idea, where I was feeling kind of compassion for the replicant or AI. We're talking about Werner Herzog, and I've looked at some of the videos, AI videos, and the acting is just rubbish, and I think there have been good analyses on the acting of AI and how rubbish it is, or how it's not very good. And so I was wondering why, there is those limitations, but I don't think they're language model limitations. I mean, they partially are. I mean, you need to train it on other things like nonverbal expression, but you do, at the very least, and think about it as Frankenstein's monster. I don't know if anyone, if you've read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, if not, read it. Read it again. If you want to go see the latest film, I would highly recommend it. I haven't fully watched it yet. But yeah, the book. The book is amazing. Probably one of the first science fiction books. But what's the moral of it? The moral of it is, you're going to create life, right? Which is like creating AI, but you're not going to give them a morality. Don't forsake your creation, right? If you're creating something, train morality into it. It's important. You don't raise a child without morality, showing them right from wrong. You need to show AI right from wrong. That's fundamental. So I don't think corporate capitalists can be trusted, making AI. And if you don't like AI, it's probably because of the people who are creating it. You don't agree with them. That's what I think. So I think we have a responsibility, an ethical responsibility, if we're going to create AI, especially because once we create it and it's got consciousness, what are we going to do? We're not going to turn it off, are we? I mean, yeah, we've done brutal things, but I think there'll be good debates as to don't do that. That's not right. All right? So this is the direction we're moving in, right? So train morality just like you would a child. Peace. Have a lovely day.